Men could assume it just runs by itself. But it is way more than how your anatomy functions. Thank God, because if it was only about your anatomy and the mechanics and the physicality of it, I mean, that's pretty much an animalistic point of view. And God made us spirit, soul, and body. So sexual intimacy is oneness in all of those areas. And we are going to weave that together and show how wonderful that is. Hi, I'm Mary, certified relationship coach, Christian sex educator, empty nester, and happy jet skiing wife who believes God's design for sex in marriage is too good to stay quiet about.
And I'm Katieann, senior pastor, wife, mom to 4 kiddos, and I always love having some fun, even when we're diving into the deep and holy conversations about marriage and sex.
So, welcome to the Sexual Wholeness Revival Podcast. I have a confession to make. Actually, two. Even before we get into our topic, we are going to discuss a book that is life-changing, and I haven't finished reading it. Now, that seems really strange because, hey, if I'm highlighting a book, shouldn't I be just fully engaged in it? Well, I am so engaged in it that I'm not rushing myself. I'm taking notes. I'm healing myself as I'm reading it. It is powerful, and I highly recommend it. I'm going to tell the title in a minute. And my second confession is I read the conclusion first. I don't often do that, but I just really felt prompted by God to do that. And He gives a personal story at the end that helped me to grasp everything from a very different perspective. And if you read it, you will know what I am talking about. But the book we are going to unpack today is called The Sex Talk You Never Got. The author is Sam Jolman, and there's a foreword there by John Eldridge. If you are a Wild at Heart fan, you would probably recognize his name. So we just want to really support men in their journey, and we've been doing a series of books for men, and I really am excited about that. I feel like that is a part of God's mandate for this season in the process of the Sexual Wholeness Revival Podcast. So we are so glad you're here. And Katieann, I'm going to give you a question here to unpack. Why do men need a book on sex, and how could they benefit from one?
Yeah, I mean, that question might seem a little silly, but the truth is you don't know what you don't know. And so there is something in our culture where I don't know about you, but in my experience, it's sometimes more challenging for men to ask for help. And so, for example, my husband, if there's a car issue, he would rather spend, the way he's wired, he would spend time, sometimes hours, on YouTube watching tutorial videos on how to do it than asking somebody who is a mechanic for help or taking it in. And so I think that there is a lot of things in men's wiring that has it be that they like to try and figure things out on their own. And although I think that's good, it means that we do need a book about sex for men, and it would benefit them greatly, because I know in a lot of the church culture that we grew up in, these weren't conversations. Like having these healthy conversations weren't taught or modeled. And so, having them now, having a book to help guide, teach, and really be applicable in this area, I think is hugely beneficial in potentially, in a maybe safer even kind of context, because they're not, they can read it on their own versus trying to get vulnerable in a big group of men. I don't know. Men are just wired just different. and I honor that and I bless that. So I think having a book like this can really help to teach, grow, and fill the gaps for them in relationship.
Wait, did you know most Christian couples never actually talk about sex in a healthy way? If this is the kind of conversation you've been missing, make sure you're subscribed to the Sexual Wholeness Revival. Follow this podcast so we can normalize conversations about sexuality according to God's design. Please subscribe today. We want to normalize this conversation for everyone. I love that. Fill the gap. There is a gap, in case you didn't know. And yes, this can really help there. And just a couple of thoughts from early in the book. Hey, I think this is even in the introduction. Some of the things that are addressed and that are suggested for men to understand is the goodness of their bodies, arousal cycles, actually for men especially, what consent looks like. Oh my, and I could talk too much about that one. Mutual pleasure, which maybe they don't know is a thing. And then the negative part, what abuse looks like. Maybe they've crossed a line. They don't even know what to do about a broken heart, whether it's their own or something that they have participated in causing. Shame. Shame comes in so many levels and disguises. Pornography, masturbation, real issues that men deal with, which would be wonderful to have a spiritual father to speak into this. And then also, how do you ask a girl out? And what is a first kiss like? And how do you pursue her heart? So the whole gamut here is represented, and it's really exciting for me because it's not just about the mechanics. And I believe that men have thought that's all they needed to know were the mechanics. And it's just so not true. What have they missed?
Yeah, I mean, I think that men being so visual and, so much of their arousal is based on the visual portion of that. And they don't necessarily, it's not just known or an inherent thing that men know that there's so much more than just the mechanics and the emotional intimacy and how having intimacy in all of the aspects, not just when our bodies are together, but through all of it, like it's not taught well. It hasn't been taught well. And so I think that gets missed. And so it's not just about the mechanics. And I know that there are, if I'm learning things about myself and I'm 44 years old, there's for sure things about it my husband doesn't know either. And so this is a journey that you go on with your spouse. It's a both and thing. You celebrate what is good, what is right, and you grow in the areas you need to grow. It's a both and thing. And I think that far too often, because of the influence of Hollywood and entertainment culture, pornography, it is solely based on the mechanics. And so that we need to have more resources and just more opportunities for our men to see how much better it can be. Like it's good, but it gets better. And here's some tools.
Yeah, more than tab A goes into slot B.
Exactly.
And some of the thoughts that are covered early in the book about sexual malnourishment, because there are parts that are missing. Your whole sexuality is malnourished. We haven't been nurtured. We haven't been cultivated in the whole expression of it. And men could assume it just runs by itself. But it is way more than how your anatomy functions. Thank God, because if it was only about your anatomy and the mechanics and the physicality of it, I mean, that's pretty much an animalistic point of view. And God made us spirit, soul, and body. So sexual intimacy is oneness in all of those areas. And we are going to weave that together and show how wonderful that is.
Yeah, and I think that can kind of feel like an uphill battle, because in our culture, when we get uncomfortable, and I've seen this. I have 4 brothers. I don't know if I've mentioned that before. So I've grown up around a lot of guys, but I think when men are uncomfortable, I think their fallback sometimes can be to make things light with joking. And I think that is also part of what happens is, there's this uncomfortable feeling, and so I revert back to the tool in my tool belt, and I'm going to be sarcastic, and it is a self-preservation thing. But there are a lot of jokes and innuendos degrading women around this topic. How many of those jokes degrading women do you think it takes to influence a perspective?
Not many. I mean, it's that starts to frame your perspective, and it is happening in men to go, I'm part of the men's club. This is just what we do, the whole locker room jargon and all. And then they come out with that outside of the locker room, and it's in mixed company. And so now that degrading has happened in men degrading women amongst themselves, and then also in the company of women. And there's no respect and honor in that situation. That is not at all God's view, but it's the culture's view. So it's a huge journey to leave that way of thinking and interacting and to choose something different.
Right. And I think too that there are some, like there's different types of these jokes. You have the more, what feels more extreme around the what are you going to do to a woman, things that are very, very crass, very dirty, and even perverse. And then you have, I think we've given a pass to the other jokes on the other side of the spectrum, like women are sensitive, and I'm doing all these things because my wife, and so that also, I believe, creates a perspective that is challenging in marriages, because then it's easy for the men to just chalk it up to, well, my wife is just sensitive, and she's critical and all of these things. And so I think that there is a scale when it comes to the jokes and stuff like that as well. And what happens is there's a disconnect, right? And so what happens when sexuality and the heart are disconnected, which is a lot of what's going on.
Exactly, because if the focus has been on the mechanics and the physicality and what's happening in the bodies only, then they're missing out on the heart. And actually, there was a phrase here from the book early on in the introduction. A guy was talking about getting off, but hating ourselves without even bothering to discover what's missing. So there is this sense of, this is the pattern that I'm going through in regards to sex, but it's empty. And culture doesn't even give them room, so to speak, to decide that this is an empty feeling. So they may not even know this is a point of discovery. Why does this feel less than? Now, in some scenarios, if there is an empty feeling, then they amp up their activities, and they might cross the line or go towards the line as far as inappropriate activities, whether it's in their marriage, whether it's outside of their marriage, because with an addiction, and I'm not saying this is specifically what we're talking about, but typically you have to try more. And if that is quantity or the depth of the activity to try to fill the need, whereas that is not the need at all. What is missing is the heart and the emotion and the connection. And truly in marriage, seeing your spouse as this woman, this wife that is a gift from God that you want to treasure and to grow that closeness with. But if you haven't been taught that or seen it modeled, then you don't know, oh, that is the part that could be missing.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It reminds me of a story I had with a married woman who they were struggling to get pregnant. And so in part of their struggle, it obviously really revealed pressures in their marriage and in their relationship and their emotional intimacy. And I remember this church leader had told them, like, your goal is to procreate. And she was struggling with this sense of, I can't even do that. Like, I can't even get pregnant. Where do you feel, where Christian culture has made the priority, like procreating is very important, but it's only one aspect of sexual intimacy. Do you believe that that is still a very current mindset, that where men say, maybe men and women go, it may not be good, but at least we're doing our part to
Oh boy.
do you know what I'm asking? Like, at least we're doing our part to be fruitful and multiply.
Is that the heir and a spare mentality? We got to have those kids to pass things on. I mean, I think the more fundamentalist you are in your beliefs, that might be the mindset. It's all about procreation, but we know that it is also about being relational, and that there is the fullness and purpose that you live in as an individual that can come out of it. When God told Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply, back in Genesis, that being fruitful and multiply was not just make babies, make more babies. It was, how are you coming alive in yourself as an individual, appreciating the beauty of the world that God created? How are you coming alive with your spouse and chasing those things together and stepping into that place of awe and wonder, not getting stuck in a rut or a routine or check the box, we have to do this to be good Christians. And then there's even more overflow, because when you are functioning in this beautiful design that God had, then you are not drained by the negative things, and then you are able to bless others more. It's an interesting correlation, but the more healed and whole your sex life is in marriage, the more you can step into your God-given calling. Just from a practical point of view, you've got energy that you can invest in other places. You're not constantly trying to mend your marriage. So God's mathematics in this is amazing, is that the more we align ourselves with what His design is, the more abundance we walk in, the more we can share that with others. So it's a win-win-win if we are lining up with God's plan.
I love that. It's a win-win-win. And I think that is what's so exciting about this topic is it is a win-win-win, and we want everyone to know that. And I think that part of what we're addressing is where this topic has been so taboo. It feels dirty even to talk about it from a biblical perspective. People get uncomfortable. And so we think that somehow it isn't, I don't know if important is the right word, but I don't know, like it's just somehow not associated with being shrewd and innocent. Scripture says to be wise as serpents and as innocent as doves. And so I think this topic kind of gets put into the R-rated when it really should be, or the, and I think that this topic should be more accessible. And so what does it mean really as we talk about this and as we are confronting mindsets and culture, culture qualities? What does it mean to be shrewd and innocent and still talk about it?
Right. So this is a specific point from the book, The Sex Talk You Never Got. And hey, if you get a book, it's on page 223. So I wanted to just drop that there. The point is that we can look evil in the face and be sober-minded and live with aliveness and wonder. So the shrewd part is knowing what evil is out there in regards to the way sex has been experienced, been managed, how sexuality has been portrayed. I mean, we have horrific things that have been happening in our culture. I think recent past, we had the Me Too movement, and I'm all for women coming forward and expressing what happened to them to expose that, to make sure that we are addressing it. I don't like to stay in that Me Too focus because it's more divisive and expressing anger, but we have to be aware that that is going on. We also have to be aware about sex trafficking. And I did a trip, it's been 3 years now, that I went to Thailand and Cambodia, and I went right there where the sex industry is going on. I saw the young girls in their plaid skirts sitting outside a building in a little shopping area, and ready for afternoon engagement with the sex tourists, the men, the predominantly male sex tourists that are there. So it's a real thing. I was with a group that was doing rescue work, which was wonderful. This ministry's been there like 20 years, so solid, and they work well with the government, and they get these girls rescued and make provision for them to get back home, which is wonderful. Hey, but sex trafficking is not just happening over there, full on happening in your backyard. I mean, I live right here, Jacksonville, Florida, and we are cross-section of I-10, which is east-west, all the way from Florida to California, and I-95, which is from the tip of Miami all the way up to Maine. And you can go anywhere. And plus, on the coast, we have so many private jets and waterways that traffickers can get in there and move people. It's horrific that these things are happening and they're real. So we have to be aware of that. We also have to be aware of mindsets that have been driving the church thought. We've done episodes recently talking about, even in the church circles, that there is wrong thinking. There are situations where under the guise of biblical headship, that the husband is calling all of the shots in regards to sexual preference, and that his wife doesn't have a voice, and there's no mutual consent in the marriage, that things are just happening sexually without it being loving and supportive and nurturing and fulfilling. I mean, these things are real, that we have to be aware of. That is the shrewd part. The innocent part is really just so engaging, because there is this sense of awe and wonder and playfulness in regards to sex, but just as a person, as an individual, can you go outside and see nature and be so intrigued by it? I was sitting in my car earlier today waiting for an appointment and just looking at the leaves on the trees blowing, moving, gradually. Hey, we're all CGI and AI informed these days. If you are having to digitally recreate the movement of leaves on a branch, I mean, think about the mathematics involved with that. And yet God is infinite, and He designed it, and His creation, His nature is so engaging and inviting if we allow ourselves to feel alive. by that. So it's a shift to get to that place of innocence in wonder and appreciation, not being naive, but to allow ourselves to be awed and to be engaged in just life that God has created.
That's so beautiful. And I love the quote that you used from this book too. And, to look evil in the face and be sober minded, live with aliveness and wonder, and live with aliveness. That really stood out to me. And I just, how can we get in touch with feeling purely alive? And what difference will it make to do that? I mean, it's such a powerful statement. It's like, I want to know more about what that means to be purely alive.
Well, the author tells a story about going elk hunting in Colorado, and that's where he lives. And I used to live in Colorado, so I was there on the edge of my seat reading one detail after the next. And the idea, the air is just charged. And when in the fall, when the elk are mating, you can hear them. There's the bugle sound of the male, and the cows, the females are making this kind of squawking sound. And I mean, you can hear the hoofs if they're moving. There is just so much activity. Now, I haven't gone as a hunter, and his story was as using a bow, going bow hunting. And the fact that he was in position, ready to catch that first elk that was close enough and missed it, and then okay, feeling disappointment, but we're still engaging and traversing the hill, getting high up and looking and just seeing this massive view of these elk in all their glory, and that sense of wonder, like, oh my goodness, this is just incredible. You feel fully alive when you're watching what God has made. And how often are we creating those opportunities for ourselves, or participating in those, or realizing we're at a deficit if we don't have moments where we feel alive? So that is so valuable. And when we are flowing in that, then as a person, certainly as a man, because he's going to step into that differently, but I love jet skiing, and that is a part of what's happening for me, being out in nature. So when that is alive and a side of you, when you show up sexually with your spouse as a lover, wow, you are bringing this whole person to be intimate and to be vulnerable and to create an experience that is incredible for the two of you. Do I sound excited about this or what?
Yes.
I feel alive.
I love it.
It's just so good. So good.
Yeah. Marvelous and awe-inspiring is really, it's out there, and it's what he's created us for.
Yes. Amen. Amen. And I hope that this word alive has gotten your attention, and maybe take it before God. What would that look like in my life if I felt more alive? How would that have a ripple effect into every area of my life, even into how I show up sexually with my spouse? And please, we would love to hear how this is sitting with you. So find us on social media. We've got all kinds of clips and things out there on Instagram and Facebook, and just leave a comment alive. We will know that you heard this message and that you are partnering with that.
Thank you, Mary. Appreciate you. And until next time, let's bring back wholeness.